Well, ladies and gentlemen, what a bumper show for you today. And let's actually get straight into the news. But before I do, come here to again remind you, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. You know all the drills, hit the bell icon, join the channel. So let's get into the news. I actually want to cover this first piece by the ANC because we need to call out the ANC for its bullshit. So anyway, this is a piece that appeared in the ANC's magazine. And this ANC author says that at its founding, the ANC has always seen the national unity of the party as central, not just rhetoric, but rooted in redressing colonial and apartheid injustices. Unity must come through transformation and not a colorblind approach. So this recent article actually shows us something very clear about the ANC. Colorblind approaches for them are never going to work. They actually want to basically apply forms of positive discrimination in order to have transformations. Now, according to this article, post-2024 elections, the ANC was at its weakest since 1994, and this forced it into the government national unity with ideological opponents. Now, according to the article, despite this, the ANC says it still managed to pass major reforms. Now, remember, we're often told that the ANC didn't pass these. They passed them underneath the last administration. They were just signed during this administration. But now the ANC appears to want to transform that narrative and say, actually, it was passed. So it seems as the ANC can't actually get their own stick right. In any case, the bills or the acts, the major reforms that you're drawing reference to, is the Bella Act, which challenges gatekeeping in elite schools, according to them, and the Expropriation Act, which reinforces land redistribution as a key to justice. Now, again, these both expose how the ANC thinks. Now, according to the ANC, the transformation agenda means that they must pursue employment equity, B, and industry transformation. And opponents, according to them, miscast this as instability, but the ANC insists it remains a political force and not a retreat. So the ANC says they need to continue with these policies, not retreat from them, even though we know that all the data shows us that these policies are destructive to the country. They do not grow the country. In any case, according to the ANC idiots, the modern recolonization is currently being attempted and underway in South Africa. They claim that foreign and domestic right-wing actors who are unable to defeat the ANC electorally try to undermine it through outside influence. And to that, I say, complete bullshit. Who are these right-wingers that you morons seem to talk about? As if right and left make a difference. The reason that you cannot defeat the ANC electorally is because the ANC mobilizes the entire state and the apparatus of the state as an electioneering tool. They use benefits, they use grants as a form of zombification of the population, saying that you must keep voting for us if you want to keep getting paid. The ANC has weaponized the state in terms of its democratic norms. Now, according to this ANC idiot, Western powers, especially the USA under its 2025 administration, that's a nice way of saying under Donald Trump, are accused of siding with those who are resisting land reform and racial justice. Nobody has any problem with land reform or racial justice. We have a problem with property theft and being racist to those you class as being the previously advantaged. Now, according to this idiot, the tactics include monitoring narratives, misinformation campaigns, sanction threats, and empowering a domestic elite aligned with foreign interests. So this is the idea that every time somebody raises the issues with the ANC, it's misinformation, and the sanction threat from Donald Trump, from the power aligned to the domestic elite, is obviously a reference to, well, organizations such as AfriForum. Now, according to this moron, they express fear that external pressure will hollow out democracy, leaving elections intact, but policy dictated by global capital and domestic leverage. Because again, capitalists are all the evil, and having any form of Western empire telling you what you can and can't do, well, that's bad. But having an Eastern one do it, well, that's good. Because that's the way these ANC idiots think. Now, according to this person, minority and foreign interests could override the will of the majority. So I'm under the impression that we have a republic where we look at what is right and not what the majority want, because we know that the majority sometimes wants the wrong thing. And so in republics, we go to the constitutional norms, what's right, regardless of whether they want it by the minority or the majority. We look at what is morally right. We don't work in a mob-type mentality, specifically when it comes through to politics. We look at the morality of the decisions we're meant to be making. But you see, the ANC doesn't have those brains. Now, according to this moron, the ANC must resist the narrative of manipulation of foreign interference. I mean, again, they cannot tell us, and they keep using this word, foreign interference, but what exactly is that? Well, we don't know. This transformation must be defended as the essence of the democratic revolution. Morons, there is no revolution anymore. You live in a democratic state. There is the democratic will, and there are the legal parameters of how you can apply that will in line with the Constitution. Can we get this into your stupid heads? There's no revolution. The revolution is over. Now, according to this person, cadres must recommit to the liberation movement, requiring political clarity, moral coverage, and international solidarity. Which all of this means absolutely nothing. I'm sure they got it on the back of a cereal box. And the individual warned about abandoning this path because it would not only lose past gains, but also forfeit South Africa's future. Forfeit what future? Socialist future? Communist future? A future where the ANC controls South Africa till Jesus comes back? Your words, not mine. Is that what you mean? Is it the return of apartheid? Because there is no political party advocating for the return of apartheid. None of them. All democratic parties have interracial representation. None of them are solely black. None of them are solely white. Even the Freedom Front Plus has black members. So to suggest that there is a desire to do that, it's just delusional. And it's the way the ANC seems to want to keep doing it in order to encourage individuals to be worried about potentially having regime change. Now, all of this is also kind of curious because in other news, apparently, South Africa was praised in a global report for standing out positively amid a broader trend of democratic decline. This is the idea that around the world, democracy is in decline. Now, the highlights of the report was that South Africa had a credible election in the recent past, and that is an election where the ANC went into a minority. They also noted that this transition from an ANC government system to a coalition government, apparently that was seen as favorable in terms of our democratic health. But what they're not seeming to notice is that, yes, whilst this has occurred, the ANC still tends to run the country as if they have the majority. Now, according to the report, it suggests that many countries are experiencing a backslide in democratic norms. This is the undermining of elections, weakening of institutions, and restricted civil liberties. So undermining of elections is clearly things such as, apparently Donald Trump undermined the last election that Joe Biden won the biggest landslide ever in history. And the weakening institutions and restricted liberties, well, we can see that even in the United Kingdom. But South Africa is bucking the trend, at least in the area cited, according to this report. Now, the shift to a coalition, the GNU, is specifically highlighted because the ANC has long been the dominant, and the transition itself implies a competitive political environment and some level of fairness or legitimacy. The credible elections, the report seems to cite that they're credible because the ANC just didn't win another majority, even though everybody knew they wouldn't. Now, that means that apparently the elections are credible? Okay, that's what the report says. But apparently the credible elections imply that voters and observers largely accepted the results and the process met sufficient standards in terms of transparency, integrity, and so forth. Now, key questions that the report highlighted was actually around the stability of the coalition government, the GNU, and does the actual ANC encourage or ensure any form of accountability or democratic resilience? In other words, are there any risks in the future of instability? And the report doesn't actually answer that. But what is interesting is the responses of Naledi Pandor. Now, as you know, the Islamist Naledi Pandor says that the survival of the GNU actually shows, according to her, that there is political maturity in South Africa and that South Africa is not a failed state. I'm going to talk about the idea of South Africa being a failed state in a moment. Now, according to Pandor, as you know, she was a former minister, she says that the fact that the South African government, the GNU, has held together since its formation is a strong signal of political maturity in the country. Now, she's rejected the failed state label. She's suggested that we need to push back against this growing rhetoric that South Africa is a failed state and argues that despite many inefficiency, important systems still function. And the examples that she gives is that children continue to go to school, public services are operating, I don't know which, because most of the public services I've seen don't work. and salaries are being paid, with revenue being collected and the private sector is still being active. Although, let's be honest, the ANC is doing everything in its power to destroy the private sector. Now, according to her, she noted that there was economic growth and that the economic growth at 0.8% was still too low to make a dent in the high unemployment, specifically amongst youth unemployment. And it's amazing that she fails to mention that it's actually ANC policy that has caused that. There's no other reason. She emphasized that economic reform and job creation must now become sharper priorities. And to that, I'd say the ANC had been banging on that drum for as long as I can remember. It's the main thing that Cyril Ramaphosa came to power in. It's the main thing that the ANC said that he would do. And he's been in a position of power for nearly 3 terms. And let's be honest, he still creates 0 jobs, 0 economic growth. So the ANC can keep saying that this is an important sector to them, but let's be honest, it actually doesn't seem that it is, because otherwise they would have done something about it. In fact, it actually seems the reverse. It seems the ANC really like poor people, which is why they keep creating so many of them. In any case, she says that there is a sense of instability in the GNU. She says people aren't always clear what the goals are for each step the GNU takes. She questions the visibility and the impact of interventions for sectors with potential, like agriculture and tourism, and she says that what logistical support has been given to agriculture and how do we grow tourism. So this is the idea that we've got all these kind of fragmented ministries, if you want to call them. They're all being run differently, and some ministries are given more focus and more media attention than others. And to that, I'd say that's actually probably true. If I asked any of you what tourism or agriculture is doing, agriculture obviously being John's department, you'd probably go, I don't know, because it doesn't really get that much political attention. But if I ask you what Gayton McKenzie was doing, well, Gayton's actually very good at promoting what he's doing. So you probably have some kind of idea, like, bring Grand Prix to South Africa. Now, Pandor says leadership must push harder and smarter, and the survival of the coalition is in the beginning. And that what the coalition now needs to do is follow through on matters and actually create jobs and create a better republic. And let's be honest, everybody's been saying that for how long? And that's all anybody really wants. Now, she says that the GNU, which includes the ANC and the DA, amongst others, there are tensions with those individuals in terms of policy speed and influencing key government appointments in terms of priority settings. The DA often accuses the ANC of being sidelined in certain decisions, and Pandor says that while she sees the survival of the GNU as symbolic of political maturity, she does warn that this symbolism alone is not enough. What really matters is performance, delivery, and clarity, and obviously long-term, the stability of the GNU. Yeah, all of that I would agree with, but you see, let's actually move on to this idea of South African failed states, because in the Daily Investor today, an article appeared that said, South Africa is a failed state. And this article suggested that South Africa is increasingly failing in its basic responsibilities around protecting citizens, ensuring reliable electricity, and water and policing. And I think we all know this to be true. Many of the water infrastructure is decaying, which is leading to areas having their water turned off for large sections of time. Electricity is very hit and miss. And obviously when it comes through to policing, well, let's not even go there. And increasingly, citizens are being forced to provide for themselves via private alternatives, whether that be your own borehole, your own electricity generation, or just having private security or your own firearm. Now, crime, corruption, institutional decay are all seen as symptoms of a failing state, and we've seen this, for example, in the murder detection rate, which has dropped sharply from 31% in 2011 down to 12.4% currently. That means that out of every 100 murders, only 12 of them are probably actually going to get found out. So murder away, guys, because the chance of getting found out is like 12 out of every 100. So pretty good chance there. In any case, according to the article, there are some institutions that are actually stopping South Africa completely collapsing. And one of those is actually the National Treasury, and the second is the Reserve Bank. Now, you will know that there is a little bit of a push, and Ramaphosa mentioned it a couple of days ago, that there was the idea that they could nationalize the Reserve Bank. So you have to say, well, these are the things that stop the country collapsing. But let's be honest, the ANC still seems to think that it can still nationalize the Reserve Bank and collapse the country good and solid? In any case, the article says that business and government partnerships are helping with issues like the energy crisis, logistics, and crime. And again, the GNU is seen as a sign that there is a form of correction and a form of course and that there is a form of correction and course adjustment which may be possible, but let's be honest, none of us have actually seen that so far. Now, according to the report, the social contract is under strain and people may question their obligation to keep funding a state if the state isn't delivered. And the idea that there should be tax boycotts, let's be honest, is growing by the day. Many individuals are looking at the idea of, why do I pay tax if I don't actually get anything for it? And many individuals are, to be frank, getting really thoughtful. So moving then on to some other news, and there is really only two more articles that I want to talk about. The first is the PA's win in its first ever ward, specifically in Ko-Khama. Now, if you know where Ko-Khama is, it just adjoins Kotha, and Kotha is a DA-run basically place. Now, according to Gator McKenzie, he frames this as evidence that the Democratic Alliance is losing relevance. According to him, they're yesterday's news. And according to him, what this really means is that the DA is losing relevance in areas that they were traditionally classed as their traditional base. That's an interesting observation. I understand why Gates is saying what he is, but Ko-Khama has actually been an ANC area. It's not traditionally a DA area. But anyway, let's move swiftly on. What this does show is that there is an increasing fragmentation in the political landscape, with areas that were traditionally ANC and DA both losing out to other parties. So what this does mean is that come 2029, we're very unlikely to actually have a majority party governing anywhere, and that coalitions probably will become the norm. Now, if you follow anything that Franz Grenier predicts, this is actually one of the key predictions he's made for some time. So let's move now on to the very final news article. And to be honest, this is the news article I really want to end with, because it's actually quite important. And this is the idea. At the moment, you'll know they're doing investigations into the potential that the police ministry has been captured. Remember, there was the KZN police officer who went before the nation, did a press conference and said that the ANC politicians had captured in order to stop any forms of investigations into political killings. Well, one of the individuals that had been called up is the former police minister, Minister Bheki Cele, who it's been suggested secretly met with the cat and has been identified as a powerful figure in tender business. Apparently, Cele met with the cat at a villa in KZN, and the villa itself is owned by an individual who's linked to a procurement contract at the Tembisa hospital. Now, the meeting apparently took place in March 2025, so actually this year. And the timing is significant because only weeks earlier, a large health services tender, 360 million rand in Tembisa, was cancelled, and observers are raising questions whether the meeting had anything to do with or influence, favor, or possible interference before or after the tender processes, and whether former Minister Cele actually had involvement in that. Now, the evidence being investigated includes WhatsApp messages where entry codes for the villa for the 18th of March 2025 were forwarded to Cele along with a location link. Now, Cele gave some responses. He confirmed that he did meet the cats at the house, but claimed that he did not know who owned the house. He declined to disclose any details of what was discussed, and the villa owner admitted to sending the entry codes but distanced themselves from the meeting's purpose, saying that the cat had used the venue for a hotel stay in Durban for a football match. Yeah, convenient. In any case, there has been public scrutiny before of the cat's legal troubles and involvement with other criminal allegations. And the secretiveness of the meeting, given what was at stake, does raise red flags over transparency and possible corruption. And very interestingly, some news released today is that former Minister Cele is snubbing the parliamentary process, which is doing investigations into potential political interference with SAPS. So it does look like he's not playing open cards, with the committee tasked to investigate whether or not the ANC had captured the state, specifically through the police. Now, it's important to note that what this effectively means is that Cele himself could also be compromised, and it wasn't just his successor. Now, to anybody who follows the news, I'd actually be very surprised, because this is the ANC's MO 101. It's just the way the ANC operate. But in any case, that's the news of today. These are all just my views. Do let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until next time, bye.